The past financial year has been a challenging one for grain growers, with variable rainfall, a fluctuating Aussie dollar and volatile commodity prices. But as Peter Redding, GRDC's Managing Director, told Groundcover TV, GRDC's focus is always on providing the tools for a better future for grain growers.
Well, GRDC is a unique partnership between the Australian Government and Australian grain growers. They each contribute to looking after research and development and extension across Australia. Our role is very much to coordinate the activities of research and development right across the country, and that's working with the State Departments of Agriculture, CSIRO, the universities, and investing that money in a way to deliver maximum outcomes in terms of profitability for Australia's grain growers.
How do the GRDC investments translate to on-farm benefits for growers?
Well, what we do, we invest across what we call several lines of business. Firstly, varieties, farming practices, capacity building, and new grain products. And each of those programs or lines of business have direct outputs that they need to achieve in terms of, in the case of varieties, new varieties to provide Australian grain growers with what they need in terms of genetic gain. Farming practices all about improved farming practices, minimum tillage, integrated weed management, etc. Capacity in terms of helping the industry in terms of the needs it has in terms of farmer capability, researcher capability, but all designed in terms of delivering outputs to growers to help them in terms of what they need in terms of practices, varieties, etc. for their profitability and sustainability.
And how do you measure then the success of these programs?
Each program has deliverable outputs. For example, in varieties, it's about the rate of genetic gain. It's about improved varieties with disease resistance, drought tolerance, etc. So we have measurements in each of those areas in terms of how those varieties are coming through, in terms of delivery, what's coming out of the pre-breeding in terms of new traits such as drought, salt tolerance, etc. Farming those through to the breeding programs, but ultimately it's about the varieties that growers are able to access. We do evaluations through national variety trials, etc. So that's how we do that area. In terms of farming practices, it's very about firstly the development of those farming practices and then the measurement of how growers adopt them in terms of their farming systems.
And how successfully are projects being adopted?
Well, if we look at the history of research, development and extension in Australia, total factor productivity has been very, very substantial growth over the years. In fact, from the periods from the 70s up to now, it's averaged about 2.1% per annum, of which RD&E has been a major contributor. And if we look at that productivity versus other commodity groups, it's well ahead. And if we also look at how it benchmarks overseas, it's also good. However, with that, we're always got to be looking for reasons of what drives productivity, and that includes things such as new varieties, farming practices, new technologies in terms of machinery, and things such as that. Over the last few years, productivity has been declining, and we've been doing a lot of work in understanding why that's the case. And the key drivers have been the droughts, the number of dry years we've had, also a drop-off in some of the level of intensity of R&D, and we're looking at ways in terms of what can be done there, and ways to make sure that productivity continues to increase.
What are some of the new investments for 2010-2011?
Well, some of the new investments particularly focus around development of new germplasm with new traits. We're doing some major investments in the area of drought tolerance, looking at understanding what are the factors that infect drought and what we can do in terms of bringing forward, understanding those traits and getting them into development programs. In the farming practices area, we're doing some major investments in terms of crop sequencing, understanding how the various crops and rotations fit into the farming practices and how they can be used to not only improve the yields and on-farm performance, but also breaking things such as disease cycles and improving nutrition. So there's some of the key investments that we'll be doing this year on top of the ongoing investments. New investments this year will be about $33 million, and that's on top of our ongoing investments of about $94-95 million.
So how do you determine the priority between long and short-term investments?
Having a portfolio balance is extremely important, and we have our whole R&D investment broken down in terms of a number of areas, in terms of its benefit-cost ratio, its time to delivery, its probability of success, and we look at that portfolio, and it's very important to have a balance between the longer term blue sky research, strategic research in areas of gene discovery, etc. But it's also very important to have delivery of technologies that are closer to market, such as some of the farming practices, such as some of the new varieties coming through. And it's always important to have that balance, so as you're continually delivering through the entire supply chain. And what we also do is understanding the way we manage that portfolio. For example, the way we manage the strategic end of the portfolio in terms of proof of concept through to commercialisation is very different how we will measure and track the farming systems, farming practices, which is more towards the delivery end.
Part of the delivery of information, of course, is communication. And how does GRDC best communicate with growers?
Well, communication's always a critical thing, and it's always something that can always be improved on. In terms of our specific communication to growers, we do that via a number of areas. We do it like we're doing now in terms of one-on-one discussions. We do it through ground cover, which is a very, very widely read publication. We have fact sheets, we have supplements. We run a lot of grower and advisor updates. For example, this year over 4,000 growers and advisors attended our updates. We do a number of direct meetings with the farming groups, farming organisations. But it's always a challenge on how, to effectively communicate and how to improve the communications so that we're demonstrating to our stakeholders, being the Australian government and grain growers, that we are addressing their needs and delivering what they want in terms of outcomes for their farming enterprises.
So at the end of the day, for growers, what should be the take-home message?
Well, it's critical that research, development and extension continue. It has delivered very, very well to the grains industry in the past 30 to 40 years. The grains industry is facing some unique challenges at the moment in terms of pricing pressures, seasonal pressures, profitability. However, it's very important that we continue to focus our efforts on research, development and extension, not only GRDC, but also the other investors, including the state governments, CSO, universities, and that we deliver outcomes from research, development and extension, because it has been historically and continues to be one of the key drivers of productivity, and along with productivity in our growers' terms of trade, that determines profitability, sustainability and the long-term growth for the industry.
Peter Redding, thank you very much for talking with Groundcover TV.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.